Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Next Mountain podcast, where we talk about post-exit transition, finding your purpose, and achieving impact. Today, we're meeting with the fantastic Raman Sehgal, an energetic and generous entrepreneur, founder of several companies, including Ram Marketing, a multi-million-dollar international marketing agency that helps companies get noticed in the global life science space. So during this conversation, we'll cover Raman's very personal experience of transition, and he'll give you a few tips as to how to thrive during that phase. Plus, we'll cover how to navigate the post-exit landscape through legacy. I hope you'll enjoy this conversation as much as I did, and please like or share the podcast to support us so we can continue to host these great conversations. So now, without further ado, let's get started. So hello, Raman. Welcome to Next Mountain.
Hey guys, nice to see you again.
Yeah, great. So maybe to get started, tell us who you are and what you do now, but also maybe your background and where you started.
Yeah, sure. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the UK originally. So I was kind of born and bred in the northeast of England, an amazing city called Newcastle, which I'm kind of very proud to be from. Graduated in marketing at university, and then just by complete chance ended up in the kind of pharmaceutical supply chain. Exact antithesis of a sexy industry, but it ended up being a very interesting space to go into. And this is like over 20 years ago. And so I worked for a marketing agency. One of their big clients was in this space. So I learned on the job about this sector, found it fascinating. It's quite an old school way of doing things. So like I was like this fresh young grad, like trying to implement new digital techniques, like, hey, you should have a website. What's a website? Like that, it was those days. And then, I ended up basically founding a marketing company called Remarketing off the back of that. And it was just like a side gig for me, like for many kind of people in the creative space, almost like freelance type work. And that ended up really taking off. And then for a few years, we did everything and anything. So any client that knocked on the door, we'd be like, hey, yeah, like we launched a TV channel, we worked with car brands, we did all the sexy stuff. But we had this solid core of like life science, pharmaceutical, B2B clients, many of which, for example, are in Montreal, where you guys are, or even in Toronto, where I am. And it just grew and grew. And we just, it was a very niche sector, but clients loved working with us. And I ended up moving to the US in 2018, and so I lived in the US with my family for a few years, and we were in Boston, Cambridge area, which is like the kind of epicenter for drug development. So a bit like Silicon Valley is for tech, like that. Certainly in that period was deemed to be the place where to be, and so by placing ourselves there, that really helped accelerate the business. Um, and ended up doing a kind of private equity deal in 2022 with North Edge Capital, who are headquartered in the UK. And actually, we moved back to the UK at that point as well. Then, and then once the deal was done, we were looking ahead at where the next few years, what the next few years look like for the business. I'd started another business in that time period as well. I'd started a podcast in the pharmaceutical sector, so very deep within the same space. But I ended up moving to Toronto because we'd identified this as a place to access great talent in North America. And so kind of my role has always been to expand new markets. So that was part of that. It wasn't actually like necessarily my final gig for the company, but effectively, as I've transitioned in the business, it's like my last big job was to come and set up the second North American presence in Toronto, in addition to the one that I did with Boston. So yeah, and then that brings us to kind of where we are today.
So, yeah, so how did that one thing I'm always curious was when you started the business, was it an exit or selling the company? Was it something you never thought, you just started off the cuff?
Yeah, honestly, Marie, like I think I was just quite naive when I started my business because if I reflect back on like why I started the business, it was like there was no strategy other than I think I could make a bit more money. Like I'm not saying that like I'm embarrassed by it. Like I think that's a lot for any entrepreneur. They see an opportunity to make more money, and it was kind of like a side gig that allowed me to do that, and it financed us to go traveling around the world and go and see the world and all that kind of stuff. And so there was no huge strategy. I think the thing I just didn't see coming was once it started getting traction and you start and really get into being a founder entrepreneur and learning about it. And I never really identified myself as a founder entrepreneur until much later on the journey. I was just doing what we were doing. We were helping clients solve their marketing issues, helping them launch their brands, and helping them go into new markets. And we grew through reputation, and we started employing more people, built up a great culture, and it kind of just really, really snowballed. And the first time it ever came up was actually, and I always remember, um, I was I was in San Francisco at a big, is it called JP Morgan Healthcare Conference? Very kind of, it's a very famous conference because when it's going on, the hotel rooms in San Francisco are insanely expensive. Like it's you have to like stay out of town because it's so expensive. And I met an investment banker who I thought wanted to meet me because he wanted access to our clients, but actually he was there to kind of like speak to me about remarketing, and you could sell that business one day. And I honestly like, and this was only 6 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. I remember being like, didn't even know that was a thing. Like I didn't come from the tech sector, like where people like start and get VC. It was all bootstrapped, and we did it all ourselves. We had one investor that we brought in who had sold a business. And so that again was like an educational thing for me, because she was very much focused on, let's build this business to not be reliant on you. Number one. Again, like I wasn't building to sell. Like it's a very, like a lot of people do that. But I think what we did really, really well is we just built a really good business. And what I mean by that is, like, if you think about deal structure and what makes a company valuable, like it's not rocket science, right? Like it's really not that complicated. Like, good quality clients, good growth, good EBITDA, not too high a client concentration, good team. These are just like good things to do in business. And so we had built a really good business based on just like, let's just keep these basic KPIs. And they just turned out to be very valuable, like almost value drivers that made our business valuable when it came to actually doing a deal as well.
And when you look back, what was driving you to do this? Like you said, kind of happened, it snowballed, but you had motivations, I'm sure.
Honestly, Nat, it was just fun. Like if I reflect back, there was a period like in 2015, 2016, and we maybe had like 15, 20 people at the time, like a smallish agency out the northeast of England. And we started winning work in Europe and in the US, and we started traveling a bit more. And we just took a very like, us against the world, not us against the world, but like we were that scrappy upstart, and we loved playing that role, which is like we had like heart and soul and passion and this genuine belief that we are the best in the world at this, and we could help clients solve their better, like, and hugely focused on like what's new from a B2B marketing perspective. What more could we do for clients? How could we help them even more? And it was very organic. Like it wasn't like I was put, like the team we had got together was all on this journey. And so, we didn't set like, and it sounds terrible, like the most, but like we didn't set like financial goals or anything. Like it's funny because I now mentor other agency owners and other owners. I'm like, you should probably know what you're trying to achieve, but like we didn't. We were just like, we were doubling in size every year. We didn't realize that wasn't normal. Like we just kept growing. And then, at some point it was like 50% growth and 40% growth and 30% growth. And then we didn't know anything other than relentless growth. It was just so fun. Like that was it. It was so fun and exciting. And every chapter of the journey was and continues to be just exciting and new because you're doing stuff that you've never done before. So whether it's working, I remember we won in 2016, we won 2 global listed clients in the space of 2 weeks. And we were like, whoa, like how the heck did we win those clients? And like we delivered 2 amazing, I mean, one of them is still a client today. That's like 11 years later or 10 years later, which says everything. But in that, then as we got a bit more sophisticated, like we started to be like, okay, like we should probably have some financial goals. We should have some profit goals and things like that. And it did change slightly because it was a bit like, well, I'm making numbers. Say we made £500,000 last year. We want to try and make more this year because if we make the bottom, like if we're doing things right, then that should fall through. But it was never, the money thing was never necessarily the motive. Like it never was. It wasn't, other than we wanted to grow because we didn't want to go backwards. It was never that we were a purely financially driven business.
So you mentioned you kind of have you went to a conference, you met someone, you first realized, oh, the idea of that you could possibly sell the business came into your head? Like, so what was that process from the moment you like realized that was a possibility to make the decision and tell us more about that?
Yeah, these investment bankers are very clever, right? And this guy is now a really good friend of mine. And like, so all he did was plant seeds. That's what he did. He planted a seed on a piece of paper. He basically wrote down, hey, like when a marketing agency in our sector gets to like 1 million EBITDA, like this is what a multiple look like. I'm like, what's a multiple? And you get to 2 million and it looks like this, and you get 3 million, 5 million. And so like he planted these seeds, if you like, of what it looked like. And we'd stayed in touch over the years, and like there was never a plan to sell. A combination of like the stress levels being very high and these like the stars aligning in terms of the market, the business, and personal. And for me, like the more I'd educate myself, say on private equity, is like it's an opportunity to take some chips off the table, and for someone to buy into where the business is going next as well. And also just help us. Like we were like 80, 90 people at that point in time. Like we had no idea what it was going to look like to grow more and open more offices. And again, potentially partnering with someone that knew how to navigate the next part of the journey was also a factor as well.
And so what happened? You decide to sell, you take these big decisions, transaction happens. What were the surprises maybe?
That's a great question. I mean, the transaction itself, like we had to do it very secretive, which we found as a team very difficult, because the team were very, and still are very loyal, and there was this sense of this is going to spook them out and all that stuff. And for all the reasons I said before, it was the right time to de-risk and bring in a partner and get investment. And what we didn't know was whether that was going to be a trade strategic buyer or whether it was going to be a private equity buyer. It turned out that actually in the end, when we ran the process, like the private equity companies loved us because we had grown so quickly. We were making good money, and like there was a lot of growth still to go. We were like that perfect fit for a kind of lower to mid cap private equity company. So like, it was like doing the deal was like the day was like genuinely one of the best days of my life. Like it was an amazing, like getting a tattoo of the day, like along with my kids' birthdays, like that's how it felt. Yes, it was about the money, but it was also like, I cannot believe we pulled this off. How on earth? Like we don't come from wealth or anything like that. And that's not to say like, you know, it's like we won the lottery or anything like that. It was more like we just hadn't come from wealth. And although, during that time as well, we'd built a comfortable lifestyle. Like we were doing fine. Like it wasn't like money was the issue anymore. But selling your business or selling a big chunk of a valuable business is like catapults you into a different world. And honestly, it felt like, and we didn't tell anyone, like none of my family knew.
Wow.
So the day it happened, I went out with my brothers. Actually, I took my brothers out. We went out for dinner. I'll tell you quite a funny story. Me and their two older brothers started having dinner together, had a few drinks or whatever. And I ordered a bottle. I was like, you know what? Let's get some champagne. Like, can I swear? I don't know if I'm allowed to curse. I mean, I'm from Newcastle. So I'll try. I think relatively PG. So I was like, oh, let's get some champagne. And then my eldest brother, who's like maybe 10 years older than me, he was like, who the fuck do you think you are? Like, what? Like, who? Like, we're not those people. And I was like, oh, like it's a nice day or whatever. Like, it's nice to have this time together. But like, my brothers were like so weird that like we're having dinner and he's just bought a bottle of pink champagne. Anyways, the champagne came back. I was like, oh, I've got some news to tell you. And then I told them, and like they were like, what? Like they couldn't believe it. I mean, they knew like the business was doing well, but like, and I didn't necessarily share the numbers or anything like that. But like, it was such an amazing moment to like share that with your brothers. And actually, it's hilariously, we finished the champagne like pretty quickly. We had a lot to drink already, and we were like, right, let's go to a bar. And as we were leaving, randomly, one of my former clients was in there. He owned loads of bars and clubs in Newcastle in the city. And I told him, I was like, oh, I sold a big chunk of the business today. And he was like, what? That's amazing. And I went back to the table and he bought us another bottle of champagne. And we were like, oh, the last thing I want right now is more champagne. But obviously we drank it. So yeah, it was like, I don't know, like I know there's a transition piece that comes after it, but like,
Yes.
like that time of my life is like something that I absolutely cherish. It was like, it felt like an out of body experience. Like like I said before, like I cannot believe this has happened. Like I cannot believe we have achieved this. It's probably different for people who come from like wealth or whatever, but like we just didn't have that. Like, and so it felt bizarre in the nicest possible way.
Sounds like you're very grateful. Like you're very you have perspective on it, and a bit of a sense of awe, which is very healthy for them relationship. It's not, it becomes less about the ego. It's more about like, wow, how fantastic life
It's
can
interesting
be.
you say that because the ego thing, the awe and the ego and the how money changes your relationship comes
Yeah.
after that. But
Yes.
certainly at the time, there wasn't anything but a huge sense of pride, like for our family. We did some cool stuff. Like we took my wife's, like we went with my wife's family to Spain for a week, and we got this amazing villa for a week, and then we took my family to Dubai, and because we were like, how do we celebrate this in a way that's meaningful? Like yes, I could buy them a car or whatever, but like it didn't feel right. And we took my side of the family, we flew Emirates to Dubai, and the day before, like we didn't tell them, but we flew them everyone business class, and like none of us, like I had flown business class through work, but like none of my family had ever flown it. But it was just like, this is not who, like, but the level of excitement and anticipation, which we actually only told them 2 days beforehand, but like it was amazing. It actually turned out to be like the last holiday we would have ever done with my dad before he passed away. And like, it's funny, we look back now being like, thank God we did that. It was like the best thing ever. And it was like, back to your thing, Natalie, about gratitude. Like it was a moment of like gratitude. And sharing it with like the people that you grew up with and love and all that kind of stuff. Like, about there was an element of being material because we're staying in a fancy hotel or whatever, but wasn't about that. It was actually just like experiencing that together. And as I said, like it turned out to be very significant because my dad would pass away 18 months later or whatever. So it was amazing. And like I certainly encourage like other founders that are going through this, like, because there's this theory of like, oh, you shouldn't do anything with the money for 6 months or a year or whatever. And like I don't really necessarily buy that. Like I'm not saying go start another business or anything like that straight away, but like I think it's very quick on your entrepreneurial journey, like is relentless, and it is really difficult to stop and celebrate the moments and the milestones. And this felt like as significant as they come. And so for me, I'm really glad we took the time to like stop and celebrate. And like I did, like I took my best three friends, I took them to the World Cup, like, and my brother-in-law as well. Like we went to Qatar and watched the Soccer World Cup. Like it was like none of them could have afforded to do that, quite frankly. And like it was like, no, like I want to do this for us because we have whichever of us would have achieved this success, like would have done it, if that makes sense. Again, it wasn't like an ego thing. It was like what else do you do other than celebrate it with the people that you want to spend time with?
Yeah. And I wonder if because you said earlier you didn't identify as a founder later on, right? Because you didn't start it with that in mind.
That's right, yeah.
Research shows that identity is a big part of this transition, and that because founders create this, it's a bit like their baby, then selling it is quite hard because I identify so much with this. I wonder how was it for you, since maybe it started differently and you did it for the fun and the passion of learning and excitement. So was it still very hard, the transition in terms of your identity and being out of the business, or how did that go?
Really, really difficult, actually. I mean, my journey since has not been, a lot of people say they'll sell their business and walk away. Like this was different because it's a private equity deal where you are like, I still own a significant chunk of that business, and I'm in partnership with the private equity company. The difference being, I think we already had a CEO in place before we did the deal, but I think what's happened since then is like, and rightly so, like as a board, the CEO is responsible for running the day-to-day of the business and building the management team and stuff like that. So my role has evolved from being like very much in the detail on the leadership, blah, 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 to actually being like as on side as a coach, as a non-exec type thing. And so that transition has been, I think I've been fortunate in the sense that it's happened over the last 3-4 years. It hasn't happened overnight. I think if it happened overnight, I think it would be much more difficult. I think especially because what you said there, Natalie, like it wasn't like I built this business to sell it. I built it and it was, I mean, the name of remarketing is literally wrapped up in my own identity. So it's difficult to uncouple yourself from that. And also we work in a very niche market. So like the perception of the business is all me and I'm the guy doing everything. I mean, that's evolved over the last few years, and everyone in the industry that's involved knows I'm not there making the decisions day to day or anything like that. But I still have a role to play. But that transition from, it's like almost like going all in on one thing 24/7 to then having a more diverse portfolio of things where you've got like time is like spent across numerous things, I think is it's very different, and you have to apply yourself differently. And I think that's certainly one of the challenges. I'm sure you'll go into this, but like, so, some people start another company, some people do philanthropy, some people do hobbies or passions or whatever. They do a load of investing. They do some kind of crazy thing where they go traveling for a year or whatever. Like, I think everyone deals with it differently. Mine's been slightly different because I've still been involved in the business. It's not been as harsh as I think it has been. And I've had an amazing coach. Like, I recognized quite quickly that this was going to be a difficult time. And I was always very skeptical of coaching. I was like, oh, these people just don't, And, actually, funnily enough,
Yeah.
I've got a session with her tomorrow, actually, and I might be actually after this. And like that time with Fran every month is like invaluable because like it's helped me navigate this transition really, really well and think about difficult situations and scenarios in a different way. And I certainly, again, encourage anyone listening that's going through that or planning to go through that. And this is, as a skeptic, I was like, oh, this is, I said bollocks in the UK, right? Like, this is bollocks. But actually, it's been amazing. It's been actually a critical part of me navigating this phase. And it's not been easy. Like, I can't sit here and say like I found it very easy because you're kind of like one foot in the business, one foot outside the business at times, and sometimes you get too involved, and sometimes you have to step right back. It's yeah, and I think it's very peculiar to founders going through a private equity type thing as opposed to like a cleaner exit. Where I've got friends, for example, that actually it's quite similar to if you do an earn out. So you could have this before where I met someone recently who'd sold their business to a big company, and they were now there for 3 years doing an earn out, and that's that's a very difficult dynamic. But you're still there doing the day to day. Whereas I've transitioned away from doing that very intentionally because I think ultimately the business is more valuable when the founder is not the person driving. When it gets to a certain scale, what you said before, Marie, like once it professionalizes and you put the systems and leadership team and all that kind of stuff, it cannot be reliant on one person. It's not scalable. And so I think we've certainly come through that now. Business runs day to day and services clients and teams, and I'm not not on Slack every day messaging people or anything like that. Like it's living and breathing without me day to day. And I think like that, I'm very proud of that. Actually, that's taken a lot of work to get there, and a lot of people struggle with that piece.
Yeah, we have learned through these podcasts, but also research and interviews, how much both coaching and being with others, peers that are living through the same, are key to, I guess, flourishing in the transition, right? Because the transition will be a transition. So there's a mourning phase. You go through the cycle. But those that stay in it and struggle are the ones that are maybe more alone, go through alone through it, and then seek less help. Yeah. So it's definitely, yeah.
I have a question. You mentioned you have three kids, a wife. So something I've heard a little bit is that some, especially founders like you, very involved in day to day, and then they sell their business, and then suddenly like they're at home. and how did that affect your family dynamic, or did your wife wanted to kick you out?
I'm sure she still does. Just before I answer that, I think you said something, Natalie, that like you said alone. Like I think it's potentially a very, very lonely period, actually. Like, there's that phrase that like it's lonely at the top, like when you're running a business. And I think actually, like, I would argue there's there's a greater loneliness after selling and transitioning because it's a bit of an abyss, if that makes sense. You know, if you're lonely in the business, you've still often got your team around you, or you've got people to like, you've got that sense of community and camaraderie. I
Yeah.
think that's difficult to replicate. And we can talk about different networks that are available to help you to navigate that. But I think for me, like that sense of loneliness actually has been more apparent in the last couple of years. And as you know, like I'm a very social kind of like never shut up type,
Yes.
creature. And so I think that bit has been tricky. And I think a lot of people I've spoke to certainly suffer from that. And yeah, Marie, I mean, on the kids side of things, it almost switches the gears into like, I'm very conscious of like, I want my kids to see me working because I think that's how I learned like what the norm was. If I'm sitting around on the sofa watching Netflix all day and my kids come home, like all that tells them is this is how grown-ups behave. I have managed to like, I think since I moved to Toronto, for example, like I was driving, still very integral to the business for the first couple of years, and then as time's gone on, that's got less and less as we kind of go through the private equity kind of cycle. But rather than just like do nothing, I've almost spent that time working out, trying to work out, struggling to work out like what to do next because it is very.
Yes.
And like the name of the podcast, right? Like it is quite tricky. That bit is quite tricky. And then like, we talked about this off air. Like I've read every book and article about this subject. Like how the hell do you work out what comes next after that? Fascinating subject, like genuinely fascinating subject. I mean, I was listening to a podcast this morning with the former England soccer manager, and he like talked, he left the most pressurized job you could ever imagine, taking the soccer team to the heights of success and failing actually at the last minute, and then leaves that job, and there's just silence. That relentlessness and intensity just goes away. So I think what I've tried to be is proactive about how to fill those things, Marie. So I hope my kids don't see they probably don't see me as stressed as much, which is probably a good thing. Like I'm not like, oh my God, like I can't, like I try to be much more present when I'm around them, my wife and kids and all that kind of stuff. And I'm in the house a bit more because I don't need to be in an office every day. But I think I'm still working on enough stuff that keeps me busy enough. And, as you guys know, I'm always looking at like new projects and ideas and things like that. So I'd hope to think my kids get the best of both worlds where they like know I'm busy enough and they understand that like, we're buying a new house, as you guys know, like that doesn't come for free like that. They very, very clearly understand the like cause and effect of working hard and apply yourself and learning and development, all that with success outcomes, what they may look like. So yeah, I'm trying to not be in the way all the time, which
That's
I
right.
suspect I'm
Yeah.
not because I'm out and about quite a lot. I keep myself busy enough, don't worry.
And what have you learned? What do you want to share from? Because I guess two questions related though, because we did connect on this topic because I think you use the word geeked out on this so much, right? You in the transition, you're like, whoa, it's a bit of a surprise when it happens. You're in this kind of weird liminal place, and what's next, and so you dove into a lot of research, and you've done a lot of interviews and met with a lot of people and got involved. So first, I guess, why did you go? Like, how was that? What was your motivation, and then what have you learned that you'd like to share to the audience?
Yeah, I mean, on the why, I think it was just my natural curiosity to be like, why do I feel like this? And rather than like go cry in the corner, like it was like I'm actually going to really learn about this and see what's written about this, and so
Yeah. And
that
maybe
was
can we
that.
pause because people look at me when I say people feel like shit in this space. They're like, "What?" Like I have a lot of skepticism. So do you mind sharing a little bit what you mean
Yeah,
by like how you felt?
like I outlined before, like the like m- the money side of thing is one thing, but then like life just goes on after that. Like it doesn't solve everything. And so for me, it was it was emptiness. It was a sense of emptiness and not feeling like that important anymore. And that was something I found like quite difficult. I think the how I felt bit was the surprising bit. Like, reflecting on what I said before about like, there's like a honeymoon period which happens afterwards, which is like, for me anyway, which felt like, oh my God, like we paid off our mortgage. Like I bought a cool car. Like, we did the family stuff. Like we celebrated it. And then, once you get back into the seasonality and cadence of life of like kids are going back to school and like, my wife's still at work, my wife's a doctor and she's helping patients in hospital or whatever, you've still got to, okay, like got to keep yourself occupied. And as I mentioned before, like, I think because I was so involved still with the business, it wasn't like it was overnight, but as time went on and I kind of was taking a step back, there's like a profound sense of emptiness, I would say, and loneliness, which happens at some point on that journey where you realize that this stuff is living and breathing without you. In one sense, like I said before, it's actually a great thing. But the other sense, it kind of don't feel very important anymore, right? Like you feel like you go from being the king of the castle to actually you're not even in the castle. Like it's quite and it's like for anyone that's not interested in the subject, like, well, I have no right to complain because of the success that I've had or whatever I did. But just because you've had some kind of liquidity in your life doesn't mean that your problems disappear. It actually creates a lot of new problems which you do not see coming, which is actually quite weird. Again, like these are like I say, like I laugh and say, like these are dream problems. Like these are not real problems, but they're still problems. There's still crap you have to sort out. There's still things you have to navigate, and so it's not kind of. I mean, you asked me what I learned. Like there's this phrase that I read in a book, and it was like, the problem with the entrepreneurs that sell their businesses is they get the pot of gold, they get to the end of the rainbow, right? And then they're like,
Now
shit,
what?
like, well, where do I go next? And actually, like the irony of it, like, is most founders and entrepreneurs love the chase, right?
Yeah.
They love the chase to get to the top of the mountain. When they get there, it's like, right,
Yeah.
okay, do I have to go back down the mountain? Like, or where do? And
Yeah.
it is a fascinating journey. And in terms of like what I learned, I think certainly from the reading that I've done and from and there's some amazing articles out there and books to kind of educate yourself on this, was like there are phases, and I think you have to be proactive about how you think about the next phase of your life. Whether you want to start another business, and I'm certainly for me at the minute, I'm very much in a phase of experimentation and exploration. Like I'm trying lots of other stuff. I'm still involved with remarketing, Lead Candidate, which is the other business that I founded, play a non-exec role there. I have a podcast in the pharmaceutical sector. So like that stuff keeps me busy enough. But then there's this other space of like cool stuff that I'm working on. I enjoy doing as well. And it's kind of like just see what sticks and actually see what you enjoy. And but it's fascinating because money's not necessarily the motive anymore, but like actually, funnily for someone like me, like I still think it's the only. It sounds stupid, but it's like it's the only tangible thing of success that I often like. If something doesn't make money, like I'm like, oh, like it sounds good, but like it's like, what's the point in doing it? Almost like, is this a good use of time? Because you could end up having like 10 things you work on and none of them create any money whatsoever. And actually they just become hobbies. You're like, well, actually you're just a person with lots of hobbies, which is fine. But I don't know where that comes from, but this psyche of like, I feel like I still need to earn. And maybe that's back to Marie, your question about the kids. Like, I think I need to, my kids are relatively young, and I think I need them to see me, especially my youngest is only 5, right? He doesn't know the last 15 years that took us to get to where we are. So he needs to see an example in my mind of like his parents, or at least one of his parents, working, and the clear connection between, we have this car, we have this house, we go on these holidays, and it's because daddy goes to work every day and works really, really hard and does this. Whether it's actually that's true or not, it doesn't matter. It's like the perception to him is that, for me, is very important.
That's very interesting. One of the things you said, a lot of interesting things. I think it's age is a factor also, because we've been speaking to people who are maybe a bit older, and they sell their business, or let's say they're like 50 and they sell their business, and you know if you look at the numbers in their bank account, like they could never work again in their lives. And that's where it's like there's this shift to, okay, now I need to start contributing or leaving a legacy, or and that's one of the things we want to help people start thinking about, is like, what's my bigger theory of change? What is the change that I want to affect in the world? And at the same time, all of these phases you mentioned are really important. Like, you need to, and personally, I went through all of these phases too, like trying to get involved in all these different projects. Some of them don't go anywhere. Travel, start working out, or start, focusing on your health a lot, or hobbies. Um, I'm curious about all of these different projects you're doing. What is kind of the most attractive to you right now? What is making you feel alive?
The business interests that I've got, the kind of where I'm on the board, both businesses are at critical stages, right? One obviously is private equity backed, and that's in a cycle, which means that at some point that business is going to sell again. So it's critical for me to be involved in that, to help support and navigate, to guide the team there. Not necessarily on a daily basis, but that's very less passionate, but it's probably the most important, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
Wrapped up in that is the biggest single investment that I have. And then the recruitment business that we started in the pharma services space as well. There's like 15 people there, and it's at quite a cool little phase now where like it's fine. It feels like a real company now. It's got all, you said like formally around like 30 to 150. It's starting to get a lot of the challenges that happen when you're not 5 people anymore, you're 15 people, and the span of relationships is different, right? We don't have this system, or like we haven't got a process for this, or well, we didn't used to do things like that. Like all that stuff starts to become apparent. So supporting the CEO with that business. And then, as I mentioned before, like we have a podcast called Molecule to Market, which is directly in that space. And that has been a great vehicle for me to meet super interesting people in that sector, build my credibility in that sector. I don't really want to lose that. So I'm like, it's taken me 20 years to build a profile and credibility in that specific space. And it's a value, and it's also enjoy it. Like, I've built so many friendships of all over the world. It's a very global industry. So I could go to Korea or Taiwan or Japan or India or anywhere in Europe or anywhere in North America, and I would have a contact or a relationship or a friend in any of these places. And I actually I love that. There's a book that I love called How to Live by Derek Sivers. And there's a phrase in that which is like, move around, and means you have friends, or all your friends are not in one place, all your friends are all over the world. And I love that concept. And so that industry I owe a lot to that industry, and I'm very grateful for that industry. So like playing an active role in there continues to be a passion, and I get to do stuff on stage and speaking events and all that kind of stuff. So that's all good. And then on the flip side, I've got like this newer stuff, which is like, it's exciting because it's newer, number one, but it scratches my itch more on the like, I almost see myself as like, I'm half in this like pharmaceutical world, which is very niche and very kind of specific, and then half in this entrepreneurial founder world. Like, I brought out a book a few years ago called The Floundering Founder. That's done really, really well, was a bestseller on Amazon and stuff like that. And that led to me doing some mentorship with other kind of agency, like marketing agency owners and business owners. And like, I found that very fulfilling, just purely because like, it's amazing what wisdom you pick up along the things that I know that I think are really like, everyone knows this. Like, it turns out they don't, right? Because it's through the battles, the scars, and the experiences and mistakes that I've made that's of real value. And then linked to that as well, I'm involved in the kind of post-exit founder community, the PEF community, and I lead their Toronto chapter, which is an awesome way to meet new people. And it's led me to kind of doing similar to what you guys are doing, slightly different in the sense of like creating a bit of a podcast platform called Next Chapter. It wasn't stolen from yours; it was Next with no T. But again, like and that's slightly different from you guys in the sense that it's not. Like, you guys go, I think, more deeper from an emotional perspective. Whereas, for me, the bit that I think is really interesting is like, what wisdom can you get from founders and entrepreneurs that have sold their business that is of value to people on that journey? So like, what are the 2 or 3 critical decisions you made on your journey to creating a valuable business that you can share? Like, there are a million things, but I'm not interested in anything. Like for me, like some of the things we've talked about today, take an investment from someone experienced that could help me navigate, bringing in a CEO, moving to the US. By far the three most important decisions I made were those three decisions that were a domino effect. And so I find it, I'm passionate about unlocking those secrets and that wisdom, which isn't just searchable on ChatGPT, because ChatGPT will give you like 500 options. But what I'm interested in is what are the stuff
key
that really, really
ones.
work,
Yeah,
the key ones, and unlocking that for other founders on that journey.
great.
But also, like, to your point as well, like really thinking about how people navigate this post-exit life and what that looks like and how they can add more value into society, which is why I love what you guys are doing, because I think that's what is central to what you guys are creating, which is like, I think one of the saddest things I saw a few years ago is like this guy that sold a really successful business, hundreds of millions of pounds. He basically just went into a black hole, right? And he didn't reappear for years. And I always was like, I understood it from a sense, like he'd go, like he was on the golf course or whatever. He was actually ended up being quite depressed off the back of it. But what really struck me was like, what a crazy loss to society, that person not being engaged in, whether it's the business world or philanthropy or charity, it doesn't matter. That person has so much to offer the world. Like them being not disengaged, but them being like in a hole somewhere is actually not great for the world. And that was one of the reasons that I found this whole subject really interesting. It's like, how do you get people to re-engage? Yeah, hopefully that answers. I am also doing
Yeah.
some stand-up comedy. I'm trying to, which is also just
Oh, that
like
sounds great.
That's great.
fun.
Yeah.
We should
So,
host you if ever we do an event together. We should have you do a little set.
Yeah. I've done like a few gigs in Toronto now, and this is like, that is a pure passion project, which is like, I know you asked a question before about like the passion piece, but also like, what do you miss? Like the thing that I miss is like, I used to pitch all the time, right? And you have to like prep for a pitch and then you have to go and present. It's not like doing stand-up comedy, but it is a bit like where you've got to create something from nothing. You then have to go present it and it either lands or it doesn't. And I love the like mini, to your mountain, like they're like mini mountains, actually. They're like, okay, I have a deadline. I'm going to be on stage in three weeks time. That's the audience. I need to come up with some stuff that make these people laugh. And actually, like, as you know, I class myself as a creative person. Okay, like I'm going to start from a blank piece of paper. How do I make this happen? And it's the refinement and the the shower thinking. It like consumes my mind. And I've done a few gigs now, and that's been like really fun, like genuinely really, really fun. Like I don't know, maybe there's a niche in like business comedy and things like that. Like that's something I'm exploring at the minute as well, which is you go to these award dinners and things like that, and they bring up these random comedians that have like never run a business in their life. They don't know anything about, like, the only thing they know about business is what they've read in the media. It's not the real like stuff that when you gotta sack someone or when you gotta fire someone and like all the crap that happens behind the scenes. And it's about like taking some of the funny moments in life and business and then like reflecting them back on stage. That's the direction of travel. Yeah, so there you go. Just enough stuff to keep me busy.
Yeah, clearly. And maybe I'd like to take us somewhere else, if that's okay. But first, I'd like to, you said when you mentioned the rainbow, I was thinking the exact qualities and strengths that make you very good at going up the rainbow are the ones that make you super vulnerable for the transition, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you're really good at dealing with pain, but not necessarily facing it and processing it, but actually just like being in pain,
Dealing with it. Yeah.
continuing and being super busy, managing stress, being okay with it, like all of that. You're not necessarily the best at feeling the pain and like processing it. Also just doing less things because you have time. You need time to process this. You said it. One thing you did is take the time, right? And so all these things are harder for entrepreneurs. So you're right. Being at the end of the rainbow is maybe less fun, less easy, less natural.
Yeah.
So it makes it harder.
I think it's a great observation. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So I'd like to take us to, I guess, in one of our conversations prior to this, we discussed the concept of legacy and causes. And I noticed now when you're sharing, like you have the strong value for work and responsibility. And that's something you want to share with your kids. And it's very honorable and very beautiful. But also you're saying, if I don't make money, I don't see the logic. And I guess one of the things we want to do is kind of like set people free from some of those kind of ways of seeing the world. so that they can explore, what if I actually want to do what, my heart really wants me to do. And I remember in one of the discussions we had, you were speaking of education and you became really passionate about that. So, and one thing that came to mind is like the best things in life don't have a price. They
Yeah,
just don't.
I
And you
agree.
can't price them. If you price them, it's a bit like comedy. If you try to explain a joke, remove the fun out of it. Try and put a price on something that has a lot of value, like a kid, like, I don't know, giving birth, like, I don't know, stuff like that.
Yeah,
You can't. It's just simply
yeah,
impossible.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess I just want to challenge you and ask you, like, what if you were to follow fully your heart? What would it be? Like, what would be an interest of something of interest, or yeah.
And well, before I answer that, I think your point right. Like, this is the thing I'm struggling with. That money thing is like, I know it's not right for that. Like, I don't need. Hold on, let me phrase this the right way. Uh, I'm frustrated that it is it is the tangible thing that I'm finding. Like, it's like in my mind of, okay, I'm doing something of value because I'm getting paid for it. Like, when I don't really need the money, if that makes sense. And I have to evolve my way and grow my way out of it. Like, it's a great point and something you're absolutely right to challenge me on. And I think going, you know, you mentioned like responsibility and things like that. Like, there are certain causes for us that in fact, I say us as me and my wife as well, like we talk about that are important. Part of this is again, like back to being a parent, is like you want to set the right example for your kids, which is like, we live a very privileged, good life. They go to amazing school. Like, this is not normal. Like, we're very mindful of reminding our kids that and reminding ourselves of that, which I think is super important. And keeping your feet on the ground and, not being too kind of egotistical or whatever. And I see in my kids, like, I think like my eldest kid, we were going through Yorkville, which is quite a fancy part of Toronto a couple of weeks ago. And he says, he's like, oh my God, have you seen all those design? Like, there was like a woman having coffee or whatever. And she was like dressed in Gucci and Dior and everything. And he found it repulsive.
Hmm.
And this is not judging anyone, by the way. This is like, and I was like, that's awesome. I'm so glad he thinks that. Because actually, like, we are not those type of people. Not that that's right or wrong. That's just not how we are. And like, I remember like saying to my wife, I was like, that's actually like a good thing that he doesn't necessarily attach value to something because it's a showing off or a value label or whatever. And again, like, I see the value and stuff. If people wear things like that, it makes them feel better about themselves or better in
Yeah.
society. Like, who am I to judge? But it's just not my vibe. And in terms of like, where could I apply myself? Like, if it wasn't about like, if I could let the money thing go and actually apply, like for me, like I think kids' education is like super important. Like, I see the value my kids get from being in a really good school, an international school, but most people aren't that fortunate. In fact, pretty much every person is not that fortunate. So my wife and I did quite an interesting exercise recently, because the one thing we didn't do actually after we saw the business was like, we didn't rush in terms of like charitable giving and philanthropy. And I'm really glad we didn't, because actually I remember writing a check for £5,000, which is what, like $10,000 for a charity. And I never actually sent the check. So I just didn't this sit well. It wasn't about the money. It just didn't sit well with me of where it was going. And I'm so glad I didn't send that check, because it got us to thinking like, where, like, what's important to us, like
Hmm.
as a family and stuff like that. And so we actually, like, earlier this year, we identified like 3 or 4 areas that we wanted to proactively support. And I don't mind sharing them with you if it's helpful. One was actually the first school that I went to, like when I was a kid. Like, it's in a pretty crap area, right? It's in an area that's suffered from economic downturn. And as a consequence of that, like, kids don't always have access to books and facilities and stuff like that. So we basically took and I went to speak to the kids when, like, a few years ago and stuff like that. And kids are hilarious, like 6, 7 year old or maybe 10-year-old kids. The first thing they asked, like, kids, you got any questions? And the guy's like, are you a millionaire and what car do you drive? That was the first question this kid asked me, which I thought was hilarious. And so, like, giving back to that first school, like, it's not significant amount of money in the grand scheme of things, but actually, like, literally every penny counts to that school, which is important. The other thing was the university that my wife and I went to. Like, my wife's a doctor, and she worked when she was training. She worked with this. There was this girl who she was training with, who Selena said was the smartest person she's ever worked with and would have been the best doctor. That individual had like quite a lot of family pressures in her own life, and it meant that she had to go support her family and get a job and leave university. And my wife thinks she never became a doctor because she left the course because effectively the pressure was from her family was like, hey, no, you need to get a job. So like we kind of donated some money to like a hardship fund specifically for people doing medical or biopharma, like similar to the sector, to people that are going to work in professions that are going to either directly help society or from a medical perspective or be involved in drug development. So like I think they call it a hardship fund. So like they can apply if they're struggling to meet their fees or whatever. So that was the other one. And the third one was like more of a, in the UK, we used to donate every year to like a soup kitchen in like for homeless people. And as you guys know, like Toronto has a big kind of homeless challenge in like a lot of big North American cities. And again, like that one's probably less driven by anything necessarily that resonates with us as a part of our experience, like the other two, but more like it's just not nice to see. And if we can do something that is actually paying to help people just survive and get a meal, like like family meals are really important to us. Food is really important to us. And so being able to help people from that perspective is great. And I think that we also talked about like I had this other grand idea, which was this thing around I have a huge issue with kids on these all the time.
Yes.
Like this concept of when I was growing up, like we used to have youth clubs, right? Like, and you used to go to a youth club and you'd play like snooker or table tennis or whatever. And you'd always just hang out, right? And it was fun. Like I remember being at like these when I was a kid, and like summers would pass and I would just be like with my cousins and my friends doing this. Like, you know, we weren't on video games all the time. We weren't off phones or whatever. We weren't on social media. And I appreciate like, this is not like me sound like a crazy old person. Like times have moved on. However, I do think like I put huge emphasis with my kids on like being able to look an adult in the eye and actually being able to speak to an adult. And it's funny, when we were back to the UK earlier this year, I was around other kids and like some of them really struggled. Actually, like not my kids, other straights. I was like, these kids really struggle to hold conversation. My kids are like, like talking nonstop because, and I'm not saying one's right or wrong. It's just like, I think these are like critical skills for children to have
Yeah.
that are just they're not as nurtured, I think, these days as they once were. So this concept of like creating these environments where almost like a screen-free environment where kids can go and hang out with each other, whether there are books available there or whether there are like, and we talked, I think areas that are under-serviced are like health and nutrition, budgeting. You know, there's a bit of this that happens in schools, but not very much. But like these are critical skills when you grow up as an adult, when you go to university. Like,
Sure.
I've only got X amount of money. How do I budget? I see it with some of my kids' friends, like what they put in their body. I'm like, did these kids know that? Like, awful for them. And I'm not, again, I don't know, but like I was never educated as a kid on nutrition, and I'm big on health and nutrition now. It wouldn't have been great if someone just like taught me that when I was 13 years old, and I would understand that if I eat good food, I'd be better at soccer, and I'd sleep better, and I'd be better at educate. I mean, these are basic things to us because time has moved on, but I think there's a real opportunity to educate young kids in areas that I think are overlooked in school, but actually are real life skills like budgeting, health and nutrition, maybe a bit of mental health, but I think that's well covered now by other areas. But that was like the grand idea to
I love
create
that
these
vision.
little
Yeah.
hubs. But just the bureaucracy involved in doing that
Yeah.
is the killer, right? It's like, I could do it. I actually have all confidence I could actually make it happen. I just don't want to deal with the bureaucracy of the crap that comes with dealing with kids. And that's ultimately what puts someone like me off. Like, hopefully, I'm not saying I won't do it, but that's the biggest barrier, especially here in
And that's
Canada.
one of the things we've learned. It's because that's where the science of happiness says, you know, when you're contributing to something bigger than you and it's something that's dear to your heart, like what you just mentioned, it is when you find that fulfillment, and that next second mountain becomes so important and much bigger than the first one, and brings so much meaning to your life. And so I guess it takes a bit of a shift in your posture, and this, like, there's so much you can bring from your skills as an entrepreneur, because there's so much wisdom, some intelligence that you can use. But then also social change is definitely not the same pace. It's definitely not the same control and command. It's it's a different type of stewardship and posture. And so developing those skills is also interesting to achieve something much bigger, though, right? Because this could be like fantastic. I'm sure you know Jonathan Haidt. He's a psychologist in the US that he published a book recently about technology and kids, and he teaches a class, forget the university, but it's a
One
wonderful
of the
class
large.
where he
Yeah.
teaches exactly what you said, which is, for example, the kids have a challenge as a homework, which is at the end of the session, what do you choose to do? And some choose to spend less time on TikTok or, like stuff like that. And it's so hard and
Yeah.
so good. Like
Yeah.
they think they would get a benefit out of it, but it's actually so much better that their life changes. So I think
Yeah.
you should reach out to him and work with him.
Yeah.
Maybe I
But
should.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, but also, I just want to pick up on that's part of the things we want to do with Next Mountain is to take that raw energy that wants to take action and actually connect it with people with this other world, which is like nonprofits and people who actually are used to dealing with bureaucracy and are used to dealing with
Yeah.
a
They can
different
do
way,
it for you.
and but maybe they could benefit from having this jolt of energy and this type of so we're still kind of thinking about how we're going to design, how we're going to mediate those relationships, how we design the right container for that to happen. Because one of the things I've seen is like this effect of like exit entrepreneur who arrives, gets in contact with a nonprofit or a charity and is like, I want to help. And then suddenly they're like bowls in China shops, and then they get very frustrated very quickly. And then on the other side, they don't want to just be seen as a check. Like they actually that's part of our thesis is that the biggest capital that exited entrepreneur have is actually their capacity for action and to be able to for pattern recognition, to be able to experiment. So how could we bring those worlds together and bridge those things? So
Maybe you can help me then. Maybe this is a good
sure.
challenge for
For
us to look
sure.
at. I started. I totally agree. Like, I think one of the reasons we were very mindful of like where we were donating to and spending time with is like we wanted to see the actual impact on, rather than just write. And I think, back to like I reflect about like writing that check and never sending it. I think was more about like it doesn't feel aligned, but I think we think this is gonna give us fulfillment, but I actually don't think it is at all.
No, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I was laughing there when you said, Marie, I did a non-exec for a charity a few years ago, and I found it so frustrating for all the reasons that you said there. Just it went at snail's pace. And I was like, oh, like, did we not discuss this like 6 months ago? And like, yeah, it's on the agenda.
Well,
well,
thanks so much for sharing.
yeah, and it feels like we could talk for hours, but any parting words or any calls to action for our audience?
Anything you'd recommend? You've said already so many things, given so many tips, but anything you haven't said that you'd like to tell people that are, maybe on the verge of selling or end of transition?
I think for people on the verge of selling or thinking about selling, I think like spend time with people that are on the other side of the fence and to learn about what you're about to go through. I never did that, and that was a bit of a regret. I was too focused on a pot of gold. Actually, I was too focused on the deal, which again is very typical. I think of founders and entrepreneurs that they focus on the end part, like the mountain, back to the rainbow, and not on the other side of the rainbow. So I think just investing a bit of time speaking to people like yourselves who have been there, I think is one thing, and then the transition piece, I'm still kind of doing it, right? So I'm probably not the best, but I think it's, having like read and listened to podcasts about this and things like that. I think taking that time to explore and understand, it's not just what your passion is, because I think passion is probably not enough. It's thinking about like how you want your days fulfilled and where that time is. I'm a big fan of like, where your calendar tells you where your priorities are. What you schedule is where your priorities are. So, Marie, you said before, like I go to the gym or run or something every single morning, like without fail. And like, I'm very intentional. It's on my diary. It's like 7 to 8 every morning. I'm doing something active. I mean, if it's not on my calendar, it probably won't get done. And like, likewise, after 5 o'clock at night, I'm with my kids until they go to sleep or whatever. Like very, very intentional. So I think, again, when it comes to transition, like being very intentional about your time and where you're spending your time, I think it's no different to being productive at work. but you're just applying yourself differently, and taking all that probably good stuff that were components of your success and applying them in a slightly different way would be the only advice I would have. And yeah, hopefully that's of value to some people.
Very wise words. Yes. Thank you,
Yes.
Roman.
Well,
You're very
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
Thank you.